3 minutes to the hour on this Wednesday morning. Check out who's in our studio this morning. New Mayor-elect Quinton Lucas. A late night for you last night. Thank you for joining us here early in the morning. Let's get right to it. What's first things first for you?
You know, it is just good to be here. So I'm going to spend today thanking Kansas Cityans and then hit the ground running. I have to call the chief of police, calling the superintendents of schools of 14 school districts in Kansas City. And for fun, we get to plan an inauguration coming up.
That's right, coming up. Okay, so you've talked about community and feeling safe, public safety being the first thing you want to do. How do you do that? What does that mean?
Absolutely. I think it continues to be a conversation about neighborhood policing. It continues to be talking about mental health, some of the important work we've been doing over the years, but only making it more impactful, frankly. And then one other thing I want to do is make sure we're working with young people, you know, making sure teenagers aren't getting involved in gangs and violent activity. And so that's what we're going to start doing.
One of the other issues, too, of course, something that impacts a lot of us, too, when we're driving around, potholes. And
you've talked a lot about potholes.
Yeah. I mean, where do we start with that, and what can you promise to the people out there?
You know, what we can promise, or I guess at least where we can start, is this idea that we're going to come up with a plan. This year, the winter kind of surprised us in a way, which it should not have. What we need to do is make sure we're resurfacing in August and September through the warm weather months so we're actually ready for next winter instead of being reactionary the whole time. So coming up with planning, giving appropriate funding to those priorities, I think is going to be key, frankly, from today on.
You know, this is a city that really has gained over the last 5 to 10 years a big momentum. We have the airport coming in, the streetcar. You've talked about maybe it's time to slow down on those big projects and focus on other parts of the city. How do you balance both? How do we not lose the momentum and focus on parts of town like the East Side, where you say they need to see more of that development?
Right. You know, I've been saying across the campaign trail ad nauseum, which is that we need to walk and chew gum. You know, in Kansas City, sometimes we just venture from one or the other. It's either get the steel plates off the roads or build a new airport. I think we can do both. And so what we need to do is make sure each year is a priority. We're doing those things like paying for infrastructure, avoiding potholes, right? Paying for enough police officers on the streets, but then also being creative, using our minds to make sure this city is better for the next generation. You know, I'm the youngest mayor in a little while, and so I look forward to Kansas City still being a great place in 20 and 30 years. That takes that long-range planning, but it also requires us to have people who live here. And for folks who live here, they care about quality of life, and we're going to make sure it happens.
And you talk about different parts of town. The Northland, Jolie Justice actually won the Northland. You won by a large margin, but she won the Northland. They have talked in the last year about being upset about trash service, snow removal, feeling disconnected from City Hall. How do you connect? Because that is a big part of the city's population up there.
You know, the biggest part of things, and by the way, you know, we perform very closely in the Northland, improving probably 30 or 40 points from the primary. But I'll just say this, you know, in the Northland and South Kansas City and anywhere, the best way you connect is by doing what you said you would do. It's by picking up the trash, it's by filling potholes, it's by actually repairing the streets. So my first step is to make sure we're better at service delivery in Kansas City. Northlanders didn't say they necessarily want to go to more meetings, they said they want their trash picked up. And that's the sort of work we're going to start doing from the jump.
And one of the things you said a short while ago, more police officers. Let's talk crime. I mean, that's something that's always kind of in the back of everyone's heads whenever you're living in Kansas City. What first things first with that? Where do you begin to kind of take on crime and make things safer? You
know, I mean, it's a big issue. I think the first is you never get used to the number of homicides, the number of violent incidents we have in Kansas City every year. It's unacceptable and it needs to change. I think first step is actually working with the institutions that are working hard to make our city safer now. That's why I'm someone who hasn't said, I'm going to change every program at the Kansas City Police Department. They're doing hard work. It's important to work with them. I think we also need to make sure we're working with schools and others that are doing so much training for young people in how to not pick up a gun, how not to be violent. And so I think we need to have a good focus there. And then finally, and I've said this a few times, mentoring. You know, folks like you all and myself, making sure we're reaching out to high schoolers and so many others saying that there is hope for you. Because where there is hope, where there is opportunity, people usually aren't getting engaged in a violent life.
You know, when question 1 did not pass, so the tax incentives can still be up to 75%, which was something that you helped bring to fruition a couple of years ago. How do you balance something like allowing incentives to still take place and also affordable housing being a priority too?
You know, I think we have seen a change in Kansas City since the passage of the last 75% ordinance, or the Lucas ordinance, whereas you're not seeing as many incentives on the plaza or downtown. We need to continue, I think, to just channel things better and actually come up with a definition of blight, which relates to what everybody thinks. The plaza is not blighted. The Intercontinental Hotel is not a blighted place. What is blighted are some of our older neighborhoods in the east side and South Kansas City in the southern part of the Northland. And so I think actually continuing to be intentional and say to developers, no, we really want you to build here. While it's nice that you want to build on the plaza, let's say, we also really want you to build a few miles east. And that's the sort of work we'll do. And the Economic Development Corporation and others really need to focus on that.
Do you know where money might come to go into the Affordable Housing Fund yet? It needs a funding source, right?
You know, in a city where we can find $15 million here or there for parking garages, we paid another $3 million on a parking garage in the West Bottoms. I think there is money in the city budget, and we're going to make sure that we're not funding things like consultants and lobbyists, which we do every year to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and instead looking at things like how do we fund affordable housing, how do we pay for those basic services like the trash. I mean, I don't think we need to raise people's taxes. We just need to spend money a lot better.
Okay, and this is something that has been rumbled about earlier in the year, but you know, I saw on your Twitter handle,
Yep.
you're a huge Chiefs fan.
Big time.
And you're talking about balancing big projects with all over the city, making sure people have basic stuff covered. What do you think about a downtown stadium? Is that something that you're saying, not right now, we have too much to do, we can't even look there?
talker.
Or is it open?
You know, I am as excited about sports as anybody, but we ain't got the money right now. So let's try to take care of some real basics, and then as the years go on, maybe that's a second term type thing or anything of that sort, we're looking at a downtown stadium.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you all so much.
He already has a very busy day slated. Day one, up and running,
After
right?
midnight last night too, as well.